How's it going? Here today on Tech Tips, we're going to talk about servos. They come in different shapes and sizes, they can do different things, and there's a bunch of little options and accessories that go with them, and we're going to talk about how the best way to implement them and use them in an escape room. So let's talk about the practical uses of servos inside of escape rooms. If there is anything that the player can put torque on, grab, move, anything that they can get their hands on that a servo is connected to, that is not the time to use a servo. That is not what they're for. They work better as trigger mechanisms, things that either movement above a player's head or behind a glass, or to cause something to occur, like to control a clock hands to do something very particular, just something that the player cannot get any purchase onto the thing that is moving this here. Now, one of the things you need to realize about servos is they're not like motors. You don't plug them in and they just go. They have to be given a command and told what to do. They have to have a microcontroller, such as an Arduino, or any kind of controller that basically tells it what to do through what's called pulse width modulation, or PWM. And so you're gonna need something that can control this. And that usually with RC things, it's a remote control. It's a little control mechanism. However, when you need something to trigger and tell it to go from one place to the other, that used to be very difficult. You had to make your own circuits using a 555 timer and all this stuff. But in the last few years, a number of things have kind of come out and made our lives a lot easier. So I'm going to show you some of these things that you can use to control a servo to do the things you want, varying from very, very difficult to very easy. Now, a very common way to control a servo is by using an Arduino, right? But not all of us have the savvy or the time to learn to program these. It's not hard, and there's a lot of examples and resources online already. And so if that's the route you want to go to control the servo, but again, this is only if you really need it to do multiple things. Like getting it to go from like one place to another using Arduino is a little bit overkill. Don't get me wrong, I've done it. But for a long time I lamented why there wasn't just some sort of board that would let you control and tell a servo to go from one place to the other, and that's it. That's all I needed, something like that. I was surprised there was nothing on the market, and then one day there was. This board here, this is by a company called sparkfun.com, this little red board here, and what it does is it tells the servo what position to start at, what position to end at, and how fast or slow to move the arm. Actually, these little things here are called horns, the things that go on a servo, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. So let's plug this thing in and I'll kind of show you what it does. One thing you want to remember with servos is servos run off of 6 volts usually. That's generally their resting voltage. 5 to 6, but 6 is pretty much the highest you're gonna be able to go with these. So all right, so I have now plugged this in to here, and what's going to happen is I'm going to take this my screwdriver and I'm going to turn this little potentiometer A, and it should cause this servo to turn like this. Yep, there you go. See how that is turning there? That's, yeah, like that. So now, so let's say I want to start here, and I've turned this all the way to the, I'll turn all the way to the right. I'm going to turn B all the way to the left, which it already is. So now, when this is going to act as a button when I touch these two things, and you'll see when I do that, it tells it to go there, and then turn back when I release. Now, that's going fast. If I want to slow it down a bit, I mess with T, which is time, and that did not do what I wanted it to. I went the wrong way. So let's do it that way. Hold on. So now you'll see it's going very slow from one way to the other, like that. And again, if I do this, if I mess with the time, it will change its speed like that. So these little controllers are great when you just need this to go from one position to another. And that's it. But I hear you say, I need some sort of more complicated animation. I need something that goes this way, then this way, then this way. I need something that's triggered and it runs a series of stuff that does a certain thing at a certain speed, all this stuff, right? So this will not do that for you. However, here are some other options that are readily available to you. We'll start with this one. This is from a company called Polalu. I'm going to put the thing, anyway, doesn't matter. So, this is one of their, I think, one of 3 different types of servo controller boards. This is a 6. I believe they have a 10 and a 24. I'll double check that. But this lets you control multiple servos and trigger them. And it has a graphical interface that lets you kind of program it out. These are great little controllers when you need, especially this one, if you need a small amount of space. But again, this may be too high of a learning curve for some people still. Let's go down to like bare bones. What if you just want to plug it in and go? What do you want to do? So you can use a FlexMax here. These FlexMax controllers have 2 servos that can be run from them, but you have to go into Director and you have to kind of control them with using that interface. And that is, it's not hard, but if you need something very easy, Fried Ideas also sells this little thing here. It's called a Pico Servo, right? And it lets you program what you need it to do, and it can control up to 4 servos, and you move it all with this little arm here. So you see I have this plugged in. You can see I can make it do whatever. So if I was hit record here and I started doing this, it would just play that back whenever this is triggered, right? So, and there's documentation for these online. The documentation for the is online as well. It's very easy to find. This is not something that's very mysterious, but these are definitely things that you should look into if you want to use a servo for something. We actually used one of the props we built for these. We actually used it was an arm chopper where a blade falls, and we used 2 servos to cause the blade to fall. That were holding it in even, so I needed to trigger at the exact same time. So we're using servos, and we just used an Arduino to tell both of them to move at the same time and drop. Now you could do the same thing with this, same thing with this. This would be overkill for something like that. You could technically use the SparkFun board. You could technically use this for that, but you would have to get it kind of, you would just finagle it a bit. You could use 2 of them and have it trigger at the same time, but at the end of the day, if you need something that's basically plug and play, these kinds of things are your best option. So now I want to talk to you about servo accessories, and there are a lot of them. There are all sorts of little things that you kind of need to know that go with servos. One of the things I want to show you is this interesting little device here. This is called a Servo Tester, and it does what it says on the box. It tests the servo. You plug it in. You can plug in multiple of them. This is from a company called hobbyking.com, and it has 3 modes. It lets you test this by turning a knob like this. And you can see it's going different directions like that. And there's a button in here that now centers it. This tells me where exact center is, because most servos, unless they're continuous rotation, have a center point. So you can see right now this horn is not going 100% in the center there. So if I needed this to be exactly centered, what I would do is I would unscrew this, because hold on, let me unplug that for a second. So I would unscrew this, very difficult to undo. Okay, so I would unscrew this this horn, and I would move it over on the teeth, and then it would be centered. So that was very embarrassing and silly. Anyway, so we plug this back in. So now the second mode is a sweep mode. It's just letting it, kind of showing you its range and what it does. So again, this is a servo tester. It just tests the servo, and so you can see what it does and make sure it works. So sometimes these cables here are not long enough. You need something else, and so they sell these. These are extension cables here to be able to run these a little longer. Now I don't suggest, you can run a fair amount of length off of a servo, but obviously, as with anything, you don't want to run too long of a length or you'll get voltage drop, and because these are already low voltage as it is, it could be a problem. But these are extendo wires here. As you can see, this just plugs into here like this, and now I can run the much longer length, or a shorter length, or whatever you need. And you can get these kinds of things online on Amazon and things like that. All right, so let's talk about servo horns. Like I said, these are what these are called, the little things that go on top, the arms, the whatever these are. I have these little containers. I have an embarrassingly large amount of these, because every time I get a servo, I take the excess pieces I don't need and I put them inside of here. And as you can see, they come in many different shapes and sizes. There's circles, there's lines, There's things that like are squares like this, little pieces like that. And all of them also, by the way, when you get a servo, it's going to come with these little rubber grommet things and these metal grommet things. And you're going to ask yourself, what exactly do these do? Why do I need these? Well, this is when you're doing for RC remote controlled stuff. And generally what these are for is to prevent vibration and movement stuff. So these go onto here, and then these also go onto here. And so generally you will never have to worry about this, especially for building a prop in an escape room. They also make metal horns. This is a metal horn, and because most of them are plastic, right? And this says 25T on it. And what that means is, that means that the teeth count on this thing here where the hub is, right here, this thing where the horn goes on to, you'll have different numbers, 27, 28, and because different companies, like this is a high-tech, Fatuba, different things like that, they all kind of have their own, I wouldn't say proprietary, but they do have their own kind of, we use these teeth thing. So be aware when you're buying specific horns or certain servos that you need to pay attention to the teeth count on that. So I showed you the little rubber grommet pieces for mounting that go in here like this. And I will tell you that mounting a servo is not an easy feat because it doesn't come with any mounting hardware. So you kind of have to hunt it down separately or make your own. There are websites such as thingiverse.com that have 3D files for 3D printing your own servo brackets, things that hold the servos in place in different sizes. There are also other websites such as Amazon. You can get little L-shaped brackets that mount these as well. There are places like Servo City that have these kinds of things, like hardcore metal aluminum cut brackets and things to mount servos. It's really impressive, some of the stuff that's on that website. We'll talk more about them in a little while. So finding your proper mounting material hardware is going to be a must, because you will get the servos, start playing with them, and be like, wait a second, how do I attach this? You know, you can take a piece of wood, cut a hole in it, drop this down, and screw it here on the sides where the holes are. And I have even been guilty of sanding this and hot gluing this and epoxying these down to do something that didn't require a large amount of torque. If it doesn't require a large amount of torque, or it's not going to get a lot of push or anything like that, then that's okay. However, I would recommend, if you're going to do that, to reinforce it, get some of that plumber's tape, electrician's tape, the metal tape with holes in it. They also have plastic stuff. Just secure these down. But in the end, you really want to get a bracket or something like that. So far, I've just kind of showed you these 3 servos here. There's a smaller size than this, and there is a much larger size here. Look at this big beefy thing. Like, this is a large and in charge servo right here. This guy means business. This servo is actually for controlling a winch on a sailboat. Like, this is a big boy right here. And you may be asking yourself, what is that contraption that is attached to that thing? And this is from a company called Servo City, and they make these things called servo blocks, which are awesome. By the way, you should look into them. They can take a lot of load and torque. They basically can turn your servos into kind of a tank, which is neat. And they're the only ones who sell these types of things that I have found, like especially this rail system. You know, this can let you open or slide something closed or move something up and down like that. This is a pretty impressive, it has a large footprint, obviously, but if you need something like this, I will tell you that it is well worth it for what it does. And that's where this bracket came from here that I was showing you earlier, because if I was to take this, now this won't fit on this one because this is a very large servo, but when you have the regular size servo blocks, that's what these were for. This was to go along the side here and then mount onto something. And so I would definitely suggest looking into Servo City and looking at all the cool toys that they have available. A couple last little thoughts on this video here. One thing I'm just going to mention, I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to. You'll notice that there are 3 wires here. You got black, red, and yellow, and black is ground, red is positive power, and then yellow or white is signal. And again, it's because not all things are, everybody accepts everything the same way. These wires, you have brown, which is your ground, your red, and your yellow for your signal. So just be aware of that. Another thing to be aware of is when you are controlling a servo from an Arduino. You can power the servo from the Arduino. However, you don't want to do that. You always want to power this separately, because it is a drain on the Arduino. It will cause all sorts of problems. Trust me, I've been there, I've done it. It is best to supply power to this separately and not power it off of this, unless it is, for sure it's not going to drain a lot of power. But even then, don't do it. Speaking of power, whenever you're powering a servo from a FlexMax controller, be aware that if it draws too much amperage on load, which is something you can find out from the specs of any servo, it'll tell you how much amperage it draws on load approximately. Be aware that if it goes over an amp, it can cause the FlexMax to basically reset itself. It just basically glitches it out, which is a problem. I've run into it and it's no fun. And I found out it is because of the amperage draw. So how do you get around this? It's very simple. You can get a hold of one of these things here. This is called a power injector, and it is also sold by Fried Ideas here. And what this does is it is a separately powered board that you run your 5 to 6 volts in here. And what it does is it controls... There we go. It controls the servo in the same way, but it's powered here instead of by the board, by the controller itself. So much like the Arduino, where I said you want to power the servo separately, you'll have, this is what this is for as well. So you're going to run your power into this and let this control your servo. So if you've run into that issue before, or if you plan on looking into this and using this, let my mistakes be your guide, and I'll tell you ahead of time how to avoid these problems. So there you go. I hope this helps you guys implement servos into your escape rooms and answer some of your questions on how to make it a feasible thing for you to do. Again, there are so many different types of options out there. You have plastic gear, you have metal gear, you have digital, you have analog, and all of what that stuff does is available online. It is a Google search away. It's not something, it would take a whole video to go over all of the nuances of a servo here. And this video was just to kind of give you a way to control them, to bring your ideas to life in an escape room. And there are all sorts of cool things you can do with them, again, as long as the players cannot touch what the servo is controlling. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, make sure you check out some of these other videos we have here. And of course, if you want to keep up with anything we're doing, make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and make sure you also check out testsubjects.com for more info. And if you have something very specific you want us to go over, please let us know in the comments below. See you next time.